Good afternoon, everyone. I'm David Gunzerath. I'm with the MRC. Thanks to Scott. Thanks to Eric and the MPA for inviting us to present today. I'm doing the presenting. I'm also speaking on behalf of my colleagues, particularly George Ivy and Anthony Torrieri at the MRC, who we co-wrote the paper for PDRF. What I want to talk about today is the concept of viewability. It's generated a lot of discussion over the last year and a half, if not longer. A lot of debate, I think it's fair to say. And what I'd like to do is to kind of address where we are in terms of developing measurement standards for digital and kind of put viewability into the appropriate context of where it fits, because it's part of an overall program that we envision. And we're right in the midst of living through the transition to a viewable impression environment right now, and there's a lot of pain associated with that for a lot of people, and there's a lot of moving parts to it. But we think it's important not to lose sight of kind of what our overall goals are for improving digital measurements. So for those of you who aren't familiar with MRC, I'm assuming most people in the room probably are, but basically we're a nonprofit industry trade association. We're supported solely by member dues who join MRC to participate in our audit and accreditation process of media research products. And we have a very simple mission, as stated up here on the slide. It's to secure for the media industry and related users measurement services that are valid, reliable, and effective. And we have two basic business functions that we do to try to achieve this mission. We work to set standards for high-quality media measurement. And once we do that, we go out and oversee an audit process in which research products are assessed against those standards, and we make decisions on whether or not they're compliant with those standards we've set. If they are, we accredit them, and those who are accredited have the right to display that seal on the bottom of the slide on their products. So turning to viewability itself, we issued the viewability guidelines in June of 2014, and it was a result of a couple of years of work that went into this. And as Steve just covered the basics of the thresholds for what constitutes a viewable impression, 50% of the ad's pixels in view for a minimum of 1 second for a display ad and 2 seconds for a video ad. We did a lot of work leading up to the issuance of the guidelines on a number of fronts, most prominently to develop what we viewed as appropriate thresholds for what would qualify as a viewable impression. But we also did a lot of other work to determine the industry's readiness to move to viewable impressions. We did as much work as we could in advance of the transition to viewability to assess measurement vendors' capabilities to measure for viewability and the consistency with which they could do that and the efficacy with which they could do that. And we were supported in this work by another amalgamation of industry associations, primarily a group that called their initiative the Making Measurement Make Sense Initiative, or 3MS. And 3MS's principal organizations were the Association of National Advertisers, the 4As, and the IAB here in the US. So we issued this guideline in 2014, giving the industry basically the rules set out for what we believed a viewable impression should be, and then we were in a position to audit and accredit organizations against it. So this was very well noted. The strong support of those industry associations and others that I mentioned just a moment ago really brought this to the attention of people in the digital advertising business, and we started getting reaction immediately, almost immediately, let me say. So, and much of it was favorable, but a lot of it, kind of threw questions out there and had some doubts about it and had some confusion about it. So the interesting thing in this piece from Adweek is, if you notice the date and the time of it, it's 12:01 a.m. on June 30th. So we issued the guidelines on June 30th. We had approximately a 60-second honeymoon period with the industry before we started seeing questions on it. And this was not unique. Over time, as viewability became deployed, there were legitimately more questions about how this transition was going to play out, what the value of it was, how people should transact on it, what it meant to their brand advertising. And so, you know, a series of articles coming out about the standards, questioning the utility of the standards from different segments of the industry. Wall Street Journal piece here, this is from a UK publication, believing the standards are inadequate. And this one worked especially well in London because Sir Martin spoke right before we came on with our session. And Sir Martin has been rather vocal about the viewability standards, as you can see here. So, but like I said, some pushback and some confusion about it is somewhat understandable, especially if you are looking at viewability kind of in a vacuum, that this is the desired end goal, this is what digital advertising and having high quality measurement in digital advertising should be moving to. And really, we view viewability as one piece of a much larger puzzle. I mean, if you think about it, you know, of course, a 2-second exposure to a video brand ad is not necessarily going to be a measure of that ad's ability to convey a brand marketer's message. You can't do it in many instances, if not most instances, in 2 seconds. I mean, in Steve's presentation, he showed some examples of some display ads that you can actually impart a brand message, or at least brand awareness, within a very short amount of time, even sub-second levels, which are below the standard that we had set. And we recognize that. So really, what's important from our perspective at this point in time, I think, is for people to have a better sense for where we're going with all this and why viewability does make sense in this larger scheme, and why it's important at this point in time for the industry to move from a measurement that's been transacting on served impressions for the better part of 15 years to viewable impressions. So a couple of key goals of the 3MS initiative, boiling down in a nutshell, it's to make those foundational measurements for digital more directly comparable to those used in other media, and to more effectively measure digital advertising's contributions to brand building, both alone and in combination with other media types. We think that foundation of number one needs to be in place before you can properly address number two, that you need to have comparability among the metrics. And the simple fact of the matter is digital metrics haven't been comparable to measures in certain other media types. So our efforts to date have really been focused on moving digital metrics to a set of metrics that more accurately measure and effectively measure the exposure of ads to people. I mean, it might seem like a self-evident concept. It's largely built into the measurement of other media types. It hasn't been built into digital, largely for technical reasons over time. The technology to determine whether or not an ad actually appears on screen didn't exist until just a few years ago. So just very quickly, this is a basic model of how the digital advertising process works. An ad is sent from an ad server to a browser. It's received by the browser. It's rendered and ultimately appears on the screen of the browser. And it's at that point where a person can actually see the ad and then engage with the ad and be affected in those ways that advertising's intended to affect people. So if you think about it, stages 1 through 3 here are really focused exclusively on the delivery of the ad. and nothing good can happen until the ad is delivered and a person has an opportunity to see. So if you think about this in terms of measurement and how measurement happens, an ad is sent. Well, the measurement that occurs at that point in time is what's called a server-side counted ad impression, which is basically the way digital advertising in its earliest days was measured. That when the ad server selected an ad and sent it off to the browser, that's the point in time that the measurement occurs. Our work over the last 10 years or so with the IAB has been to move that point of measurement to what's called a client-side measurement, client-side served impressions. So basically what this means is that there's confirmation by the browser that the ad has actually been received by the browser. So you have greater assurance that the ad's reaching its intended destination. And where we're moving now is to viewable impressions. That the ad not only is received by the browser, but it actually renders and appears in a portion of the browser screen in which it can be seen. On top of that, we're looking to add other elements to this. Once viewability is established, we've also recently issued guidelines for filtration of invalid traffic, and also we're working on guidelines to segregate, or rather to segment impressions by audience targets. And that is the point in time that we think we'll have digital measurement on a more even playing field with a measurement like television, for example, in which opportunity to see is built into the traditional measurement process. So our focus to date has been on measures of ad delivery. Turning to those next stages, well, ad engagement measures. These are the next step of the process. We envision, once we have these other pieces in place, starting to tackle engagement metrics in 2016. There's been some work done on this already. IAB has put together a white paper. I believe Scott worked on this, on engagement metrics. We just issued social media measurement guidelines, so that falls into this category as well. Moving to that fifth stage of the model, ad effectiveness measures, we actually have what we call our MRC minimum standards for media rating research. We've been doing assessments of survey research products for 50-some years. We think we're pretty well equipped to deal with most digital ad effectiveness studies using that as a framework, and we'll address any more specific stuff that's unique to digital as needed going forward, and getting to the very end goal of advertising some response on the part of the recipient of an ad. Behavioral measures, we really don't have plans to standardize that at this point in time. We don't think it's needed. In fact, it's probably more effective not to have industry standards around this, but you know, who knows what happens in the future. So these are on our roadmap. You know, again, we think these other things can only be effectively addressed once ad delivery is firmly in place. So our strategy has been to tighten up measures of ad delivery, to assure that there's an opportunity to see the ads. We're continuing to work on this, and in early 2016, we expect to have much of this work accomplished that we haven't done so far, and the other stuff related to engagement and effectiveness is on our future roadmap, but we're not quite there yet. Finally, just where we are today. Prior to June of 2014, digital was operating with a currency based on served impressions. Today we're kind of in an interim period. Currency's moving from served to viewable impressions, but really where we want to go is currency based on viewable, human valid impressions in target for audience characteristics. And this is our outline of projects we're currently working on. Some of these have been completed since we presented in London, specifically the invalid traffic guidelines and the social media measurement guidelines. The other ones, we have timetables firmly established for them. And happy to answer any questions or address any questions. My contact information is up there, and if you have a chance, read the PDRF paper because it explains this in much greater detail. Thank you.